Hello, everyone. Welcome back for some more of our reading of Fate Strange Fake. We got the announcement of when the anime apparently might return. I say like apparently because you know how it goes. It's been kind of delayed multiple times. But hey, that's fine. I want to make sure we're in like a realm where we're good to go. So, let's get back to reading with the 5th volume of this. I'm excited because it's been so good and so hype. So I'm real excited here. I see a number of characters. It seems like we're focusing on Clan Calatin here, right? We got all these characters. And so, well, hey, guess what? Speaking of characters, let's just flip this thing around so we can sort of see who they all are. Yeah, looks like we have ourselves a good number of characters that we're going to need to keep track of. On the far left, we have the Clan Calatin. I don't know who those two are in the middle meant to be. Let me grab my my phone and hit translate on there so I can actually see their names, because I don't know who those two are. Let me check here. Most of these I can tell, right? The ones around Gil there. Who are those in the very middle? The one with the teddy bear, too. Detect language. Okay, I don't think we've met Charles and Amelia. Those are new characters we might be learning about. The little group down there, that's teenage subordinates. Okay, right? We see Mohawk Man up there. We see Tine herself. We have Ayaka's group. That's Faldius and who? Faldius and Adora. Right, we heard about her. I'm quite... Okay, so we have Flat. We have El Malloy. We have Rongul. We have... Who is this guy? Okay, it says Lop Belafan. I don't think we've learned about who he is. I'm shocked to see Zelrich and Alcatraz here. I know Alcatraz, he has a story that I am currently in the process of translating myself. So, well, I shouldn't say that. That's a lie. I'm paying someone to translate it and working on it here. Okay. Oh my god, there's so many, right? Who's Mr. Albert Wesker there? That is... Oh, that's Basil Dot. Okay. Okay, that's Basil Dot Corleone. Who's up there beside the other one? Oh, Pale Rider. That's him. He's the one that's just kind of the shade. That's a really interesting design for Berserker there, right? We see a little bit more of him. And confirmation that, once again, Saint Germain will be a main character to watch for. Okay, this is good. These pages are very good at showing just how many players are in. And even though there's some that we haven't met yet, I'm sure we'll be meeting them not too quickly here. So let's get this flipped back up. Okay. This is exciting. Here we go. Fate Strange Fake, Volume 5. So let's get looking down here. So let's see here. Let's look at our chapters. Nothing. We got the Bridge, Rondo of the Outsiders, Golden Lions, Mercenary Assassin Vampire, Golden Lions, Mercenary Vampire Assassin, Breaking Dawn and Wakeless Dream, Mercenary Assassin, and One Day Atop a Building. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Summer, 1842, on the Mediterranean Sea. Now, who might this be related to? Summer 1842. I have no idea. Gentle waves pressed against each other in the blazing sunlight. A ship split and scattered their gleam as it advanced across the water's surface. Although it could hardly be called luxurious, the sailing vessel had a certain elegance and strength about it. On board, a man spoke. "What's that island over there?" The man was gazing at the silhouette of an island. Although it was beautifully formed, tracing a gentle curve, it was a barren expanse of yellow-brown rock mingled with traces of pale green. "Oh, that place? There's nothing on it, mister. Just a desert island." "Oh?" The man responded to the answer of a nearby crewman with interest. "No one lives there. I see something that looks like a building." "What?" "Oh, well, I don't know about it. Never taken the trouble to stop there." "But you're right. I wonder what it is. The crewman returned to his work with a quizzical look. In his place, a man approached holding a cup. What is it, brother? You've fallen for that island or something? He was a well-dressed and well-built man with gentle features, but his eyes seemed to flicker with the light of a solemn intelligence. But you know you shouldn't fall for islands or oceans. They're scary women, a fright when they're angry, and ready to leave you penniless if they get half the chance. Well, I guess they could be men. The man shrugged. The man who had first been staring at the island shook his head. The day we met, it was my friend, then my dearest friend on the ship out. Now on the return voyage, you're calling me brother, Prince. If anyone heard you, I'd be stoned for ies majesté. Okay. Nonsense. If I care more for a man than for my own any friend, but not as a lover, then I have no choice but to treat him as my own flesh and blood. Well, that's good. That's good. We should tell Kanokunasu about this. The man who had been called Prince took a gulp of the liquid in his cup and flashed a grin. Besides, you never bothered with that kind of formal courtesy in the first place. Well, we could converse a bit more attractively in prose. Want to do this by letter? It's not me that people truly pay respect to. It's people like you. People who give others joy. I, at least, cannot give people as much joy as your romantic play, L'Alchimiste, or your novel, Le Chevalier de Harmental. It was you who accomplished that. Okay. None other than Alexandre Dumas. Your reputation will never suffer as a brother to the former emperor's nephew. Oh my god, I see who he's talking to right now. Oh my god, I need to change their voices greatly. The man who had just been so excessively praised, Alexander Dumas, smiled wryly at the man in front of him and shook his head. I'll be damned to think that the illustrious nephew of His Imperial Majesty Napoleon Bonaparte would sing my praises like that. I'm grateful, but I like to avoid a life under house arrest on that island. The man Dumas was addressing, Napoleon Joseph Charles Paul Bonaparte, smiled cheerfully in time with the rocking of the boat. He was the nephew of Emperor Napoleon I of France and the cousin of Napoleon III. Because his father, Jerome, had been king of Westphalia, the 19-year-old was either called Prince or Plon Plon. Oh, Plon Plon, his nickname. That's an adorable name. Also, I don't think you should ever call royalty that, you'll be killed. He had become acquainted with Dumas, who was already a best-selling author at the time, when Dumas traveled to Italy, and at Jerome's recommendation, they had gone on to Elba together. They had enjoyed themselves hunting on the island where Joseph's uncle Napoleon I... Oh, I shouldn't say it like that. That's just, let's, you know what? Let's stick to just Napoleon I. Some of these names I'm not going to give accents to. Had once been exiled, and were currently being rocked by the ship, bearing them back from it. By the way, brother, Joseph turned, a winning smile on Dumas, more than 20 years his senior. Do you hold a grudge against my uncle? Dumas answered with a shrug. What could I hold against the great Napoleon, Emperor of France? I hear my uncle treated your father awfully coldly, and that he even refused your mother's requests for a pension. Drop it. It's over and done with. Well, I did live poor a long time because of that, and my mom had a rough time of it too. I think I'd be within my rights to sock him one for her, but... After a short pause for thought, Dumas continued slowly while gazing at the island. I never told you about the time I met your uncle and had a talk with him, have I? First I've heard of it. It happened when I was barely 13. He'd come for a victory parade, and I went to get a look at him. Oh. He paused at that point, and the ship tilted sharply. With a pistol hidden in my breast pocket. That sentence, spoken in the break between waves, carried an impact like a scene in the play. Joseph, however, listened to it in silence. I'd planned on challenging him to a duel, throw my glove at his carriage. It was His Imperial Majesty who insulted my old man and my mum first. That ought to give me the right to choose the weapons. But my uncle didn't die there. And the great author is right here, alive and well. Yeah, I walked up while everyone around me was shouting, Vive l'Empereur! I must have looked like a ghost. I caught a glimpse of a pale face through a gap in the carriage. He was just a little man worn out from battle. It was simple. All I had to do was hurl my glove at him in place of a challenge. Once I did, I was sure he'd order the soldiers around him to shoot me or chase me off. But that would be fleeing from our duel. He deserved to have the townspeople mock him as the emperor who ran from a duel with a kid. A moment later, the poor brat, drunk on thoughts sicklier than the emperor's face, pulled out his glove. What do you think he did with it? Dumas recited his past rhythmically, in time with the rocking of the ship, and in a clear, resonant voice, like an actor delivering his lines. The answer is that he waved it. He raised the glove he meant to throw high above his head, and before he knew it, he was shouting Vive l'Empereur with the rest of the crowd. Yes, Prince, your uncle was a hero, but he was also hated by a lot of people. I'm sure there were any number of people apart from me who wanted to hurl a glove at him. I bet there was a crowd of people who came wanting to just put a bullet into his carriage and not bother with dueling too. But every last one of those people showered the pale, worn-out man with cheers. I don't know what made them do it, but the Emperor was the people's dream. He was their idol. Once I realized that, I couldn't go through with it. It's a fine soldier who can coolly point a gun at a man he admires, but I'm no soldier. It's because he made me realize that I now fight with a pen in my hand instead of a gun. Bringing the long story he had begun gravely to a close with a light-hearted tone, Dumas winked and grinned at his friend more than 20 years his junior. Does it come off all right when I tell it like that, Prince? Was that one of your inventions, brother? Who knows? But if someone else wants to make it that way, they'll make it that way whether I affirm it or deny it. The truth dims in the face of an amusing lie. Put the other way around, even if you're stuck with the awful meat called truth, with no amount of boiling or grilling will make it fit to eat, you can still make it a bit more palatable by letting it marinate in history for a few years and seasoning it with a sprinkle of lies. I love that. That is so good. That's a damn good line. Dumas spoke far more cheerfully than he had when relating his own past. Joseph was exasperated, but continued to press him. But now that I've heard this much, brother, I'd like to know what that meat really is. In this case, the truth is, well, I'm not carrying a grudge against Napoleon I or his bloodline anymore. When I had stories like that one just now, it hardly matters if they're truth or fiction, does it? I see. Then to you, even a desert island is an ingredient worth dining on. Still, out of all the desert islands out there, what makes you so interested in just that one? Do you have some kind of history with it by any chance? Joseph asked with a raucous laugh. It's just a hunch, Dumas shrugged. Just a hunch. A hunch, huh? Well, I suppose that counts for a lot in your line of work. It's an island I spotted while sailing with a relative of His Imperial Majesty. I was thinking that I might as well make it famous in memory of our meeting. At that, the nephew of the man who had been Emperor of France turned to the island and, giddy as a child, spoke in a voice bursting with enthusiasm. Yes, I think there's just something about that island myself. A few years back, I even heard rumors of a man who bears the same name, just between us. What? I heard rumors of a person who bears the same name. Huh. Just between us, the hidden side of the church even made some strange moves. The hidden side of the church? Okay, I'm just trying to see here. I'm trying to see who's, because, okay, the nephew, so he said this, and then this was Dumas, okay. Oh, forget about it. The church wouldn't even bear all of its secrets to my father, there we go. And he was a king. Anyway, there have been rumors of treasure and miracle stories about that island for a long time now. City children, fishermen, adventurers, religionists. Because there's nothing on that island, all sorts of people have been able to project whatever dreams they want to see onto it. But almost no one actually tries to search for it, for fear of finding that there's really nothing there. Hey now, you trying to steal my thunder? Telling a story about that island's my job. Just tell me what its name is, brother. Joseph, pleased at being called brother back, proclaimed the name of the island, his eyes shining with anticipation for the novel Damas would write about it. Oh, here it is. That island is called Monte Cristo, an island of possibilities that contains everything because it has nothing. Oh my god, we're getting in. I'm like 90% certain the Count of Monte Cristo isn't in this, but I could just be wrong, I guess. Bridge, Rondo of the Outsiders, Part 1, okay. Here we go, Rondo of the Outsiders. And in our next story, the string of sudden deaths yesterday of senators and industry leaders due to accidents and illness is causing chaos in share prices on the New York Stock Exchange. Should what happened in Snowfield be called an ordeal or not? The more accurately someone had been observing events, the more inclined toward not. That was because that series of incidents, unprecedented in the history of the city and perhaps even the whole of the United States, the Holy Grail War, had been deliberately engineered. The city of Snowfield itself was a test site created on American soil for the ritual. Abandoning the site and starting over would have been the plan from the beginning. But that was only the mastermind's point of view. As far as ordinary people with no knowledge of mystical matters were concerned, all of that was irrelevant. As far as the ordinary townspeople with no knowledge of the reasons behind it all were concerned, it was a calamity that descended on them without warning. The Holy Grail War. An exclusive ritual known only to a few, even among mages. With heroic spirits whose beings were engraved into the world's throne as their familiars, mages would battle each other with every fiber of their beings over an omnipotent wish-granting device, a genuine foothold on the path to the root. It was said that it had begun with other intentions, but the Third Holy Grail War, held more than half a century earlier, had seen countless factions scheming beneath its surface. Then, in the Fourth Holy Grail War, held over a decade prior, the loss of one of the lords of the clock tower had drawn the attention of a very small group of mages who made it past efforts to suppress the information. Of course, in the grand scheme of things, it was considered a dubious ritual performed in the Far East. What was being held in America, however, was beginning to show itself as far too strange and twisted, even for a Holy Grail War. To begin with, there was the fact that the number of heroic spirits summoned was too large. The Holy Grail War was ordinarily fought by 7 servants, and while this one had appeared to conform to those numbers at first, from about that time that a heroic spirit, seemingly of the saber class, had appeared before the TV cameras of local TV station and declared his intention to make reparations for a demolished theater, a major divergence from the original Grail Wars had begun. A ritual of magecraft ought, properly speaking, to be conducted in secrecy. To anyone who dealt in magecraft or mystery in general, that principle was absolute. And yet this fake Holy Grail War had barely begun before it was broken, almost as if that had been the mastermind's intention all along. There was single combat between Archer and Lancer in the desert. The clash of their noble phantasms had turned part of the desert to glass and left a massive crater in its wake. Officially, it was declared a gas pipeline explosion. Then there was Assassin's assault on the police station, seemingly aimed at Saber, who was being held there. A hematophage, who seemed to be Assassin's master, had forced his way into the station amid the chaos, and Hansa Cervantes, who the Holy Church had dispatched to oversee the Grail War, had gotten dragged into the brawl. Officially, it was declared a terrorist attack on the police station. It was followed by an attack on Archer and his master, who had taken up a position in the Crystal Palace Hotel, which shattered every window in the vicinity and was explained away with the work of an unforeseen tornado. Then 2 powerful servants, as well as something else, had caused widespread damage centered on a meat processing plant in the corner of the factory district, a mage's workshop with the backing of the Scladio family. The devastation was still being kept from the eyes of the public by an illusion cast over the area, most likely by a caster-class servant. In just a few days, severe distortions were already forming in the unfolding ritual, a mystic ritual in the form of a battle to the death between mages and the familiars, and no ordinary familiars, but heroic spirits, embodiments of mystery itself. No matter how carefully the groundwork for that ritual had been laid, in the face of a string of irregularities on a scale that threatened to annihilate the city, concealment was reaching its limit. But far from coming to a conclusion, the situation had begun to show signs of irreversible expansion. With complete disregard for all preceding atmospheric conditions, a massive hurricane had formed on the west coast. In an area centered on Washington, D.C., key figures in business, politics, and information were dropping dead one after another. Those who knew what was happening behind the scenes realized that those disasters were not natural. They realized that a great tide had risen in the city of Snowfield, and the world was being inexorably dragged into its shadowy depths. If one were to deem this an ordeal bestowed by some higher power, then it would be like being flung into an endless labyrinth in which it was impossible to see which way lay ahead, let alone the finish line, because they had yet to realize that they were in a labyrinth at all. A private chat on a certain social network. Flu. Well, that's about the size of it. Let me just give you my conclusions. Snowfield is dangerous. To be honest, I want to get out as soon as I can. I mean, this is nothing like I was told. Of course, no one mixed up in magecraft would ever tell the truth unless they were forced to, but even taking that into account, it's still crazy. The core of the ritual is probably based on the one in Fuyuki, but its scale and foundation have gone completely out of whack. First off, the ghost liners. You veterans call them servants. You said 7 of them fought when it was in Fuyuki, right? Well, I checked in with my astrology, and this is a whole other level. There's nearly twice as many things I wouldn't want to mess with. More than twice as many. Wait, more than twice as many. Going by some disturbances in the stars that I can't tell if they're servants or not. I was watching in front of the hospital last night. First, there was a 3-headed dog. Then 200 of what looked like phantasmal showed up out of nowhere and went at it with a heroic spirit I've been too scared to even stare at too hard. Who is this talking? It says Flu. Flu? Who's Flu? I don't know, man. Okay. Either way, well, where is it? After that, the magical energy got too disturbed for me to observe anything properly. You better not tell me that was Cerberus and a bunch of demons. Either way, things that don't belong on this side of the city are swaggering down the main street of an American city. If this was a dream, I'd want to wake up. I'd take a pretty childish mage to send me a dream like this. Just explaining what happened after that is a pain. I've attached an encrypted pseudo-video file. Whoa, use Magecraft to decompress it on your end. But if you think it's a hoax I cooked up, that's all I got. I won't get mad if you're suspicious. If I were in your shoes, I'd be demanding my money back and sending a curse or two right about now. Of course, you're not like me, so maybe see it a different way, Mr. Scourge of Mage Society. Okay, so this is... it's someone chatting with Elmaloy. That nickname was uncalled for. Anyway, thank you for your report. It sounds like the situation is worse than I thought. You could say that again. I thought that the crater in the desert was the worst it could get, but it's been shooting past that and dragging the whole city down to a new low twice a day. Anyway, what's the deal with there being too many heroic spirits? The land here is pretty good for ley lines, but from what I hear, it still doesn't measure up to Fuyuki. It doesn't make sense that more heroic spirits than usual got summoned in spite of that. They're probably priming the pump. Yeah? The first several heroic spirit summons were used as a catalyst to intentionally disturb the ley lines and temporarily draw in magical energy from elsewhere in America. It's a dramatic measure, like inflicting damage on the body in order to stimulate an immunity. So, in order to summon 7 ghost liners, they summoned and sacrificed another 6? They used those crazy ghost liners as a catalyst like you'd use chicken blood? Isn't that a bit too out there to believe? In order to push 7 pendulums to the fore, they shoved probably 5 or 6 pendulums into them from behind. Ordinarily, they would only move an equal number of pendulums, like a Newton's cradle, but the supervisors who shape the land simply have to add enough power to push the 7th pendulum. Now that the first set of heroic spirits have served their purpose, they'll probably be absorbed into the land over time in order to preserve the balance. That's not a pretty thought. I only half believe what you told me, but I bet that guy in the shiny gold armor really is the Akkadian king of heroes. The instant I took a look at his star from a far-seeing spell, my head spun and I thought it was going to scramble my brain. They must be out of their minds if they're using someone like that as disposable kindling, not even material for the Grail. Exactly. It's hardly what you'd call a sane idea, regardless of whether we're talking about mages or people who have nothing to do with or about people who have nothing to do probably about mystery. Or they have nothing to do mystery. No, that makes sense too. Such methods speak to a group with a disdain for mystery as such. That's who you ought to be calling a scourge. God, I can't read right now. Are you really one to talk when you're analyzing mystery over instant messages? Well, even if they are private? At present, fewer mages devote their efforts to Spiritron hacking than to communication via magecraft. Any method carries risks, but given the limits of my abilities, this is probably the safer option. Even if it's intercepted and read, any ordinary person will assume it's some sort of joke, and there's no need to hide it from anyone who's already on our side. In fact, the more serious any proper mage is about concealing mystery, the harder they'll work to erase these ridiculous reports for us. Would any mage really care about talk like that? Well, that will change in a few years. The handheld devices called smartphones have begun to appear on the market recently, will probably become common enough to have influence even on mage society. As the danger of mystery being recorded increases, methods of secrecy will have to change. It could end up being easier to see dummy stories and label, oh my god, and label everything fake news? Whoa, what the frick, are we really doing this? Okay. That's all the more reason I want to avoid a needlessly large-scale ritual like this creating holes. You talk as much as always, or I guess type in this case. Can't believe you can run off a wall of text like that in under a minute. You're not working some kind of magecraft I can't catch in all those letters, are you? You give me too much credit. The games I play for fun sometimes require exchanging condensed information quickly. It's Monster Hunter, he's playing Monster Hunter. Besides, I could never incorporate a concealed formula for such a high level that you wouldn't notice. Still, even online and in writing, the way you talk doesn't change. I'm used to it, and using your real name as a screen name is actually a reference issue. It'd suck to slip up and poison yourself with one of your own curses. Well, anyway, I'm gonna poke around here a little more and then get out of here when the going gets rough. Everyone who tries to leave gets hit with some weird curse and comes back under mind control, but I'll do a reading to find out where the curse is thinnest. Sorry. I'm truly grateful that you are already in the city. Okay, so yeah, this is someone new then. I managed to make contact with one of the masterminds, the chief of police, and form a temporary alliance, but I was only able to get partial information out of him. Based on what he told me, it's likely that he hasn't been informed of everything that's going on either. That's what makes your objective information so helpful. Oh, I just came because I thought there might be nice jobs on offer. A magecraft using mercenary has to be quick on the draw if he wants to keep himself fed. Putting you in my debt ended up being the most profitable choice. You're a real lifesaver. Just asking, but there won't be any other lords heading out here, will there? That won't happen. Old Roofless of the School of Spirituality is currently away from the clock tower on business, but he isn't the type to visit the scene in person. Even if something did go wrong over there, you'd only shrug. It's that matters have merely reached their natural conclusion, although he does appear to take some interesting ghost liners. Good. It's good enough to know that there won't be any more dangerous people showing up in town. As it is, it's so full of people in my line of work that I've got to be careful not to tip my hand. Speaking of which, one of my colleagues who's made a bit of a name for himself in Asia is already participating as a master. Well, he's still a rookie compared to the real experts, but he makes up for what he lacks in magical energy with survival skills you wouldn't believe. Guy's like some kind of puppet. His name's Sigma. You better warn your little student to steer clear of him. Thank you for the warning. I already wish that I'd warned Flat more about how dangerous the Grail War can be. Well, that stings a little, considering I came here hoping to get paid. My apologies. Meant no offense. I know, your lordship. Well, I've got a situation I need to deal with here, so I'll be signing off for now. I got a weird bit of guidance from the stars earlier. I included it in my report. I'll be in touch if I find anything out, so remember to add a little extra to my payment. Flu has logged out. Okay, so who could this be? I don't know yet. I don't know who this could be yet, huh? Snowfield City Hall. Now, boasting's all well and good, but things are getting out of hand. Snowfield's main street was enclosed in a ward to clear the area of people and surging with limitless magical energy. A lone man inside City Hall shrugged as he surveyed the street, which was the center of Snowfield and contained both the city hospital and police station. The man who, until a moment before, had been exchanging words with his client, Lord El Malloy, Lord of the Clock Tower, in a private online chat room, silently looked up at the stars beyond the window. Still, Mr. El Malloy seemed pretty pissed off. It was true that he had been unable to detect a curse or anything else expected of a maze in amid the string of letters in the chat room. He had, however, been able to sense a seething anger in the man called El Malloy II. Not about the mystery of magecraft being toyed with. Maybe about the place he called his own being defiled? Honestly, he acts nothing like a mage, but he goes around revealing other people's magecraft. He's probably already got a way to dismantle this messed up ritual worked out in his head. I wouldn't be scared to go toe-to-toe with him in magecraft, but I'd never want to go up against him as a mage. I guess that over-specialization was what makes him one of the Clock Tower's top 12. The solidly built man with flowing beard ran his fingers over a keffa? What is that? Oh, am I showing my hand? Am I showing my hand? What that looks like a familiar word, but what is that? Oh, it's like the Middle Eastern sort of scarf where they have well, not the scarf, but it's like where they have the how do I say this without sounding horrible, right? Because there's a way to describe it, but the way okay, it's like a scarf and then they have a thing wrapped around it, right? Yeah. That's the best way. I was worried if scarf was an appropriate way to say it, but it is, because I'm seeing that be how it was described there. Okay. So this is just a new character, right? Let's see here. Was he on the list there? So we're on page 21. Is he here? I don't think so. I'm looking here. Wow. They show us all these characters and then immediately introduce us to another one. That's crazy. Okay. The solidly built man with flowing beard lightly ran his fingers over a keffa that seemed out of place in the heart of the city, far from in the desert, and dropped his gaze to the deserted main street out the window of an empty room of City Hall. Well, I'd better act like a scout while I can still see the stars from this city. His name was Pfluger. Okay, Pfluger. Well, that's his name was Flu online, which was close enough, I guess. He was a magecraft using mercenary, an astrologer labeled as a teacher killer. All right, I'll stay away from you. He had caught wind of this Holy Grail war and come for less direct monetary gain than to build a wider network of connections by promoting himself to a wide range of mages. Once he learned that the Scladio family, infamous even among dabblers in magecraft, was involved, however, he had contented himself with observing events. It was then he had been contacted by a familiar lord from the clock tower and immediately accepted his request to investigate. It's true the stars and I were mixed. It's true that the stars were mixed, and I knew it'd be a high risk, high reward. Oh, I just realized I'm not. There we go. I knew it'd be a high risk, high reward, but can the reward really be high enough? Pfluger sighed, chuckled that it was too late to withdraw, and pulled out several knives from a pocket and tossed them into the air. Lead me. No sooner had the knives come to a uniform standstill, tracing arcs in the air, than they began to stab themselves into the floor around Pfluger, as if they had a will of its own. Despite the stone tiles, the dagger blades sank half their length into the floor. Pfluger slammed his fist into the center of the magic circle drawn by their points and circled his magical energy between the earth and the sky. Lead me now. The dagger slid into motion like shark fins gliding through the floor, then rose, defying gravity to float around Pfluger once more. Their points waved like compass needles and then began to come to a halt, each pointing in a different direction. A few of the daggers, however, continued to spin wildly, like compass needles in a disturbed magnetic field, and showed no signs of stopping. Has the number of heroic spirits gone down? No. Pfluger had just performed magecraft to view the flow of fate through astrology in order to determine the direction and distance of heroic spirits, which did not naturally belong in this world. If a heroic spirit had been eliminated, its corresponding dagger should have simply fallen to the floor. And yet several of the daggers continued to float in the air, spinning energetically, as if to deliver the contradictory report that heroic spirits existed but were nowhere. Oh, give me a break. I'm just a scout. I'm not going to intrude on the workings of fate, and solving mysteries is that clock tower professor's specialty. Still, he looked out the window again. The rays of sunlight that had begun to illuminate the street revealed marks of fresh destruction. What happened here after that? It was as if a disaster had struck the street and nowhere else. Bits of the hospital fence and wreckage of parked cars littered the torn-up asphalt. The pipes had been damaged because jets of water were gushing from several deep rents in the ground. You could say it wasn't much damage compared to the crater in the desert, but it was obvious that the destruction caused in the center of this populated city would impact the minds of its residents more deeply than the wasteland calamity. In fact, they would likely connect it to the explosion in the desert and to the other mysterious phenomena. The practitioner of magecraft employed by Lord El Malloy's second scout, however, was focused on a different point. He was focused on the fact that, in the wreckage where a fierce battle had almost certainly been fought, not a single dead body or drop of blood remained, as if the existence of life itself had been swept away. The clock tower. Are you all right, Master? Yes, nothing's the matter. Lord El Malloy II answered his apprentice, managing to furrow his brow and look exhausted at the same time. His apprentice, recognizing that he was only putting up a front and feeling that she ought to do something to ease her teacher's distress, voiced a suggestion. Have you considered contacting Miss Tosaka? She's been through a Holy Grail war, so she might know some way for Flat to survive. It can't be helped, or it won't help. I can advise him from experience myself, and now that the war has changed so much, her information coming from a deep involvement with Fuyuki could actually prove detrimental. Besides, if I told that lady about this, she might very well go storming off to America. I haven't told Svin or the other alumni either. I can't knowingly send my students into danger, even if they have graduated. Elmoy II's hand clutched a cellular phone in place of one of his trademark cigars. He placed several calls while speaking with his apprentice, but the person he was calling showed no sign of picking up. He pictured the face of the person he was calling, the longest attending of his students who had yet to graduate, Flat Escardos, as he grumbled at the phone which had gotten no answer in hours. That idiot. If it turns out he's just sleeping in, I really will never forgive him. Despite his words, his tone said that he hoped fervently for that to be the case. And in our next story, the hurricane that suddenly developed off the west coast of the United States has been given a name not from the unusual set list due to its unprecedented behavior. Oh god, what are they going to name it? Chapter 14, Golden Lions. Let's see here. Here we go. Chapter 14, Golden Lions. Several hours earlier, Main Street, near the Snowfield Central Hospital. The sight was like a fantasy. No, however, in the sense of a delightful paradise. Not, however, in the sense of a delightful paradise. It was fantastical in the sense of a battle between gods or a vision of hell. Berserker Jack the Ripper had transformed into more than 200 demons. Their overwhelming domination, which had slaughtered the three-headed dog that belonged to the true archer who called himself Alcides, and had seemed poised to overwhelm the heroic spirit as well. When that power to become a demon, the spirit origin called the Noble Phantasm, had been completely stolen by Alcides' Noble Phantasm, Reincarnation Pandora, usurper of heavenly winds. A noble phantasm that stole noble phantasms. Its power defied reason. With it, Alcides had acquired a grotesque strength. He kicked Jack aside and raised his weapon to slaughter the police officers who stood in his way. But just then, the other archer, the first of all heroes clad in golden armor, appeared. The further arrival of Saber, his red-streaked blonde hair fluttering, and his party sent the situation spiraling into even further confusion. Well, okay, so who's saying this here? Oh, Sigma. Well, this is a surprise. Can these servants even be fiends of the pit? Saber. Richard. Oh, no, this is Saber. Okay, no, Saber asking him. Sometimes I need to read ahead to see who's speaking. Okay. Well, this is a surprise. Can these servants even be fiends of the pit? Saber, Richard I, the Lionheart, asked the dark-haired young man behind him. The situation was obviously abnormal and filled with countless sudden deaths, if he even took one false step. But Saber was unfazed, as if to say this was where he belonged. The dark-haired young gentleman, Sigma, the self-proclaimed master of Lancer Chaplain. I forgot about that. That's so funny still. Was oblivious to the prevailing mood in a different sense from Saber, replied matter-of-factedly. I've been told that anti-heroes may have even appeared in the Fuyuki Grail War as well. According to my employer, beings like that are sometimes summoned when the conditions are right. I see. Well, it is capable of summoning fairies after all. If a banshee or something had turned up, I'd like to have a look at it for old time's sake, but it appears this isn't an opponent I can afford to sit back and watch. Saber surveyed the heroic spirit who had taken on a demonic appearance, then glanced upward. The same goes for the gaudy one up there. Above them stood a man clad in golden armor, who exuded a powerful aura. Know your place, mongrel. The heroic spirit, looking down from atop the church's belfry, addressed Saber with an air of displeasure. Who granted you permission to look up at me? Arrogance. If one were to put a word to his manner of speech, that would be the natural choice. Saber, however, immediately realized that it was not hubris. He was not able to understand that the man was saying that he was nevertheless worthy of being granted permission. The golden heroic spirit stood above him. The demonic bowman stood in front of him. That flashy fellow is an archer too. I see. Oh my god, really? This is really silly, for obvious reasons. 2 archers? Can you believe it? I can't believe there'd be 2 archers in a Grail War. That would be crazy. 2 archers certainly does mean that this Grail War isn't normal. It appeared that, just as a Lancer he had met in the forest had warned him, this Grail War was far from ordinary. In spite of that, the knowledge he received from the Grail pertained to a proper Holy Grail War. That probably meant something. But Richard didn't have time to consider difficult questions at the moment. The golden heroic spirit probably far outclassed him. The strength of his spirit origin rivaled that of the beautiful Lancer Richard had met in the forest. He could tell at a glance that he had no chance of winning if they fought head-on. And then there was the grotesque bowman with demon's horns sprouting from his head, with whom he had conversed earlier. He could tell that this heroic spirit was likewise so powerful that he had no hope. Richard's spirit origin tensed, and instinctively warned him of danger. The alarm came from fragments who were not quite heroic spirits, and who had accompanied Richard due to his noble phantasm. Do you want to die for nothing? Retreat before it's too late. Locksley the assassin, Pierre the bowman, and other fragments of spirit origins continued to cool-headedly sound the alarm. He could sense the spirit origins of an indifferent-seeming swordsman and a mage who merely smiled faintly, but Saber himself was focused on the overwhelmingly mighty opponents standing before him, his eyes shining. My heart gave me permission. I doubt I could even look down on you, but I take you for a storied heroic spirit worth looking up at. A king, judging by your manner. It's not every day I meet someone who merits respect just by standing there. I know my place, and so I give thanks that I was able to be here today. Oh my god, mongrel. Do you intend to appraise me with such eyes? I have no need of thanks. I have not permitted you anything. The golden-armored heroic spirit spoke dispassionately, without changing his expression. Be gone at once. At that, the space behind the heroic spirit distorted, and countless weapons emerged from holes in the air. When they moved, it was with the intent to kill Saber, who opened his eyes wide in astonishment. Like arrows loosened from drawn bows, numerous weapons shrouded in magical energy on par with noble phantasms fired at the spot where Saber stood. Sigma must have sensed the danger in advance, because he had already retreated to an alleyway by the church. Saber, left to stand alone, hesitated for a moment, but then spoke as if he had made sense of the situation. When you said be gone, you meant from this world. He drew his sword with a cheerful grin. Ha! What a droll fellow! It was a dull-bladed ornamental sword that had adorned the walls of the mansion in the wetlands that Sigma had made his base of operations. But as far as Sigma was concerned, having a grip was enough to make a fine weapon. The sword flashed for an instant and began swatting the weapons launched from the golden and heroic spirit out of the air. Even so, it was only able to strike down a few, a drop in the bucket compared to the dozens of noble phantasms raining down. The golden heroic spirit was apparently convinced that would suffice and had already turned his attention back to the monstrous archer. The demonic-looking archer, however, turned to look at Richard. His expression was indiscernible behind the strange cloth that covered his face. Richard's instincts as a heroic spirit immediately alerted him that he was being evaluated for some unclear purpose, but he had no time to consider the point. In less than a second, the countless weapons were nearly upon him. That's, slightly scuffed art. Just slightly. Richard leapt, knocking the swords away once again, and danced into the tiny gap left by the several weapons he had knocked aside. He had dodged the onslaught by a hair's breadth, but the weapons struck the ground around him, smashing the asphalt. The torn-up earth became a new threat to Richard, pouring down on the spot where he stood. Richard, however, was no longer there. I see. So blades as fine as these cause disasters just by sticking in the ground, Richard called out, moving with incredible swiftness and seizing one of the noble phantasms lodged in the ground, a weapon in the shape of a longsword. What magnificent workmanship! Just holding it makes me feel as if I had an army at my back. I don't just mean the quantity of magical energy it contains. I mean this craftsmanship, this construction, this composition. It's plain to see that even its least decoration is both simple and complete. If one of these arms is the work of the planet, they both form the headwaters and the fertile plains. Hey, listen, this is marvelous. Are all of these other weapons as fine? And you toss them down like they are nothing. Where are you, Maharaja? Where are you, Maharaja? Oh, Maharaja. Oh, yeah. Where are you, Maharaja of? Oh, I tell you frankly and with respect, you are magnificent, and I envy you. Despite having just evaded an attack that had it struck him, would have certainly proved fatal, Richard's eyes sparkled like a child. His sudden outburst drew bewildered stares from police officers, who were doing their best to keep their distance and regroup. The next words out of Richard's mouth would have seemed like nothing short of suicide to anyone who knew the golden heroic spirit. Say, since you have so many, oh my god, would you mind giving me a few? Oh my god. Inside the church. How can you smile in a situation like that? Snowfield's largest church stood across the street from the hospital. In one corner of it, a woman muttered, drawing in her breath. And a somber man's voice echoed from behind her. Judging by your gaze, miss, may I presume that you are Saber's master? The words of the priest dispatched by the Holy Church to oversee this Holy Grail war, Hansa Cervantes, caused the blonde woman who had been peering out the window, Ayaka Seijo, to glance briefly in his direction, then shake her head. I'm not a master. Oh? But I sense a path of magical energy linking you. Aren't you here in this church to seek sanctuary? No. I only came because Saber said this would be the safest place nearby. Ayaka spoke brusquely, with the minimum of courtesy for the priest's station. Hansa was not especially put out, and joined her in looking out the window at the street as he continued. Oh, good grief. This is supposed to be a shelter. I can't have people treating it like a watchtower or a trench. Ah, well, it's not a big deal. Using whatever you can is what war's all about, especially war between mages. Hansa shifted his attention slightly upward and let out an aggrieved sigh. It looks like a heroic spirit's gotten up on the roof. Honestly, what does he think this sacred church is? I took you for a mere fly, but I see you are a shameless beggar. The heroic spirit on the church roof appeared to take an interest in Richard for the first time. He turned not just his gaze, but his head to face him. The golden heroic spirit looked down with less anger than pity in his eyes. Richard continued, unperturbed. I suppose it is rude to just ask you to give them to me. I would love to buy them if I can afford their price. Richard persisted in speaking casually to the golden heroic spirit. But having laid eyes on such treasures, I can't suppress the feelings they inspire in me. I'd run into battle with as many of them as I could carry if I could. I assume, given your preemptive strike, that We're already at war, but for such fine pieces, I want to do things properly, no matter the circumstances. I'd like to borrow these weapons as I please while we fight. How does that sound to you? You have some nerve to joke like that while laying your hands on them so casually, mongrel. The golden archer scowled. Still, it seems you have eyes for fine craftsmanship before letting glitter cloud your mind. As a reward, I shall permit you to stain my treasures with your blood. Receive it gladly. By the time he finished speaking, he had already taken action and launched dozens more weapons out of thin air. They rained mercilessly down on Richard, who held both the new sword he had taken and the one he had come here with. They were slightly faster and more numerous than the previous attack. Richard weaved between the weapons, planting his feet on the chunks of rubble they flung up, and used them as stepping stones to leap high into the air. Since I'm risking my life for this joke, I'd like to ask another favor from you. Then, twirling like an acrobat, he unleashed a weighty series of strikes. What I want isn't blood on your weapons. Oh. It's to leave just a little scratch on your magnificent armor. Evading the oncoming swarm of deadly blows, Richard changed direction in midair. He completely changed course without a stepping stone of any kind. Although he had been under considerable strain, he contorted his body still further, adding the force of his rotation to make his sword reach the golden heroic spirit. Seeing that, the scowling heroic spirit drew the sword in his own hand. So you, a mere gladiator, weave magecraft. The golden heroic spirit parried the nearly surprise attack and dropped to the roof one level below the belfry, glaring at Richard, who held one of his treasures. He did not shout angrily or lose his composure. His tone remained one of rebuke for lack of courtesy. No, that wasn't me. Richard judged that he was still unable to so much as bring the golden heroic spirit down into his arena and readied his swords again, grinning provocatively up at his opponent. It's a little joke my retinue played on you. I'm a bit confused by this section. Okay, so Richard dodged it, right? He wants to leave a mark on it. He changed course. He contorted his body to reach the heroic spirit, scowling, so he drew the sword in his own hand. So he did that. The golden heroic spirit parried it, dropped to the roof below. He did not shout, "That wasn't me." So what was the use magecraft? Oh, I see. No, so what's happening is there was a bit of magecraft that was being used, but I was very confused here, but this is saying that this is Richard's group, because again, he has some extra people helping him out. They use the magecraft, right? Okay. I see. Okay. He's fast. The grotesque bowman Alcides kept his distance and observed the new contender's capabilities with a cool gaze that belied his wild appearance. His dexterity was probably about on par with the Amazon riders on horseback. Alcides could sense no divinity from him, which told him that the heroic spirit had been formed as a pure human. His speed, however, surpassed human limitations, and the magical energy that swirled around him was shrouded in an aura that was neither human nor divine. He isn't strong enough to make my blood run cold, but purely in terms of speed he might outmatch me. Depending on his noble phantasm, he merits caution. Alcides then recalled the power, similar to magical energy, that surged from Saber's body. It was like the Naiads had abducted my attendant, Hylas. He was on the verge of dredging up memories of the time he had left the Argonauts from the depths of his spirit origin when he was forced to abandon that train of thought. The police officers around him had gotten back into formation and were showing signs of resuming their assault on him. I must apologize for focusing on other enemies during our confrontation. You have no intention of withdrawing? One of the officers asked. Alcides shook his head. Just as you have things you must protect, I have things I must steal. There's no need for us to understand each other. If anyone can find common ground with my intentions, such villain would also be my enemy. He would vanquish those who opposed him. Those who made peace with him, he would also destroy. It sounds unreasonable to the extreme, but Alcides continued as if to test the officers. What I am going to do is slaughter a child, unable to comprehend my reasons. Once I've done that, I will have no business with you. Will any of you forsake a child to save your own skins? He gripped his bow as he posed the question. He did not draw the string, he merely gripped it. Even so, if he were to suddenly swing his bow, casualties would result. The quality of the noble phantasms the police officers held didn't matter. The heroic spirit standing before them was beyond such distinctions. All of their legs were shaking, but still, in spite of that, they did not flee. They did not look away. They were not unafraid. Some of them were holding back tears and chattering teeth. If this had been a normal mission, they would have called in a temporary retreat. But they understood. If they retreated here, it'd be the end. There would be no heavily armed riot squad, or no National Guard coming to deal with the vicious criminal. Even if there were, they would probably never be more capable of facing him than they, armed with noble phantasms, already were. They were the best. They were there because they were pawns the police as an organization. They were the best pawns the police as an organization had to offer. They couldn't say whether this was a suggestion that their chief implanted them or a routine that had seeped into them as autosuggestion. They, who were registered as Clan Calatin, had only their chief's assurance. You are justice. Just those words without anything to support them. But those who believed them, those words were a spell, or perhaps a blessing, that bound action and fate. And the one most bound by those words was a young officer who stood on the battlefield despite the loss of his right arm. Orlando Reeve, chief of the Snowfield Police Department, was one of the managers, or one might say the masterminds of the fake Holy Grail War. As far as ordinary citizens were concerned, one of his subordinates, John Wingard, could have been called the ideal police officer. When he had been barely old enough to understand what was happening, he had seen his mother's death on TV. John's father had quickly turned it off to shield his son from that flame-shrouded scene, but that instant of fire had been indelibly engraved in John's mind. His mother had been a police officer who received numerous commendations for her achievements. He remembered that his generally unemotional father had told young John about his mother as bedtime stories to stop his crying. When he thought back on it, it may have been a kind of curse. Since then, John had been chasing the shadow of the mother he barely remembered. He had been told that his father was a mage even by the time he joined the police force. John was a third son, and his oldest brother was to be the next head of the family, so as a mage, he had only been regarded as his brother's spare. His father apparently concealed his true identity even from John's mother, but it seemed that the higher-ups of the United States government, or rather certain departments that dealt with the field of magecraft, had been aware of his existence. When it came to dealing with mystery, no nation, no matter how powerful, could help lagging behind the Holy Church and the Mage Association. It was in that context that John had been summoned to a certain police facility and informed of his origins. His father had apparently already agreed. John had been sold to the state on the condition that his father, who was estranged from the Mage Association, would receive the government's financial backing. John had been confused, but the instant he actually performed magecraft himself, his skepticism vanished, and he'd been forced to accept reality. He had felt fear. If this power really existed, just how many cases had it been used to cover up? Or just how many cases had it been, used to cover up? How many unsolved cases involved magecraft? How many innocent people have been wrongly convicted due to false information? He could understand the concept of concealing mystery. He could not, however, understand the concept of sacrificing others to do so. For mages, it was a matter of course, but John had been raised as an ordinary person. In the midst of his anger at the unreasonable nature of mage society, Orlando Reeve had spoken to him. When heretics commit outrages, it takes other heretics to keep them in line. John, having been headhunted by Orlando and assigned to a unit under his direct command, had transferred to Snowfield, where he learned a shocking truth. This city is going to become a battlefield for mages. Now that the government has taken action, there's no way to stop that. We could fight the government, but that wouldn't even be recklessness, it would be folly. Oh no, it's still him. We could fight the government, but that wouldn't even be recklessness, it'd be folly. That being the case, our duty is to continue to maintain order while it happens. We need to prove to all mages that here, The border with the world of magecraft is guarded. Never forget, if we fail, at worst 800,000 people will be sacrificed. He did not agree with everything the chief said. He even made attempts to get that plan abandoned, sure that no government could be so cruel. The more he learned about the plan, however, the more he understood that no individual effort could possibly change anything in time. He came to believe that the course the chief proposed was the most rational. They would take control of the course of the Holy Grail War and suppress the situation before harm came to ordinary citizens. John believed that if they could do that, it would stand as proof. If they had the power to overcome heroic spirits, the ultimate familiars, they would become a major check against mages just by continuing to be there. John did not understand that the monsters called mages would never have that sort of common sense. To mages who would treat even their own lives as pawns in order to reach the origin, a check that consisted of only great strength was just a fine subject for observation. Not having been brought up as a mage, John could not comprehend the cunning wiles that the Mage Association, the Holy Church, custodians of mystery in the truest sense, employed to spread their roots throughout the world. And there was one more thing he had not understood. No matter how spectacular a weapon he had, no matter how he honed his magecraft, mind, and body, there were horrifying monsters out there that would return it all to nothing. The moment John realized that was the moment that the monster commonly known as a dead apostle that called itself Jester Kartur had taken his right arm. He had lost his arm completely when it had been eaten by the hematophage that called itself Dead Apostle during the assault on the police station the other day. But because his supporter, Castor, Alexander Dumas, had provided him with a new prosthetic arm, the chief of the police had reluctantly permitted his return to active duty. He had only been permitted to return as support for the other members of Clan Calatin and not to stand on the front lines. But they had quickly lost the ability to maintain a formation with any distinction between front and rear lines. Half the nearly 30 police officers armed with noble phantasms had sustained injuries and were unable to move normally. It was the most the remaining members could do to maintain any kind of formation at all, and they were in no condition to put up a proper fight on their own now that Jack the Ripper had retreated. They had also not anticipated another heroic spirit they had obtained information about in advance, Gilgamesh the King of Heroes, joining the fray. He was currently engaged in combat with a newly arrived saber, but the King of Heroes' fighting style was both bizarre and straightforward. He forced his opponents to surrender their lives through the force of overwhelming quantity. They had heard about his indiscriminate firing of noble phantasms, but now that they actually saw it, they could do nothing but dumbly let the scene burn itself into their eyes. John even wondered for a moment if they were only confronting the grotesque bowman in order to avoid facing the reality of the King of Heroes' power, but the heroic spirit in front of them was no less dangerous, so he abandoned the comparison as meaningless. What I am going to do is slaughter a child unable to comprehend What I'm going to do is slaughter a child unable to comprehend my reasons. Once I've done that, I have no business with you. Will any of you forsake a child to save your own skin? The bowman before them asked solemnly. They had no obligation to answer him, but John opened his mouth before he knew what he was doing. If there were, I wouldn't laugh and be this is him. If there were, I wouldn't laugh and I wouldn't be disappointed either. That doesn't mean I could let you through then. Oh? You won't run then? If I were keeping my cool and thinking ahead, I'd want to run. I doubt I'll be able to beat you no matter what I do. But I'm afraid of abandoning a kid in exchange for a future and a cool head. After hearing that answer and scrutinizing John for a moment, however, Grotesque Bowman made a strange pronouncement. You have courage, son of man. I would not call you foolhardy. For that, I pity you. No, the bowman said to the bewildered John. It's none of your concern. The next instant, the bowman was standing right in front of John. What? The movement appeared instantaneous, but it was achieved not through speed due to physical strength, by moving in a gap in their attention. The movement testified to the fact that the grotesque bowman did not just rely solely on physical strength, but also possessed of a skill achieved through superhuman training. John, however, did not despair at it. He had no time to appreciate the difference in power before the massive bow struck his neck. Then, before he even knew what happened to him, before he even had a chance to prove that he could fight with the prosthetic arm Damas gave him, John Wingard was sent flying with a broken neck and smashed into the hospital's glass entrance door with a loud crash. Even as a pitiable police officer was about to lose his life, the duel between Richard and the Golden Archer continued to unfold on the roof of the church. The Golden Heroic Spirit kept up a relentless series of attacks while still managing to appear unruffled. He nevertheless shot the occasional inquisitive glance at Richard, who continued to dodge his assault, and posed a question to him without dropping his haughty demeanor. "Mongrel, I permit you to answer my questions." "I'm honored." He slackened his attacks, but there was no complacency or conceit in his opponent's eyes. Richard could see plainly that taking advantage of the opportunity to charge in would lead him to taking the brunt of a heavy counterattack. He therefore decided to halt for the moment and listen to what his opponent had to say. "You've scrapped through a similar predicament before, haven't you? I can tell by the way you dodge." "Yes," Richard answered with a shrug. "I went through the same thing yesterday. It was all the other side up, though." "What became of your opponent?" "Oh, we made friends. Our masters, or contractors, seemed to get along too." Richard corrected himself in deference to Ayaka, denying being his master, but that did not really seem to make much of a difference to his opponent, who showed no particular reaction to it. Richard failed to notice, however, that the Golden Heroic Spirit's eyelids twitched in surprise. Oh, wait! Oh, you think he's gonna be mad that Enkidu got a new friend? Oh no! The Golden Heroic Spirit's eyelids twitched in surprise at the words "we made friends." Even so, he could tell that his mood had changed. Until then, he had been eliminating an insolent pest. Now, however, his animosity had lessened, and a different mood was filling the area in its place. It was the atmosphere that Richard had surrounded himself with in life, but that fact was lost on his present self. "I see. They may be my friend, but they are as soft on others as ever." The Golden Heroic Spirit smoked with a wry smile. His words puzzled Richard, who had a bad feeling about what was coming. "What? My friend? I've heard this somewhere before." One day earlier, to be precise, when he had proposed an alliance to the Heroic Spirit he had met in the vast forest. "You see, that one best friend of mine is rather hard to please. Whenever I try to make friends or form an alliance with someone, he says, 'I shall test you to see if you are worthy of my friend,' or something like that. Then... this is him actually saying this right here, okay. "You see, that one best friend of mine is rather hard to please. Whenever I try to make friends or form an alliance with someone, he says, 'I shall test you to see if you are worthy of my friend,' or something like that, and then chase them off with unreasonable demands." Then Richard noticed that, unlike earlier, all the space around him had begun to distort. "Oh, this looks like I'm going to die, isn't it?" Surrounded on all sides by the noble phantasm launching distortions, Richard sensed death with every inch of his body. The Golden Hero addressed him just as the Lancer Richard had met in the forest had said he would. This was the flashback, okay. It's a little tough to tell at times. A little tough to tell, right? I know it's meant to be like we're in the flashback here, but okay, so this was, right? This was Enkidu saying this, okay. Right? "I shall now test you to see if you are worthy of my friend." Hey, now, just because someone might take your friend doesn't... Richard began to crack a joke, but cut himself short. He was not unperceptive. One look at the Golden Hero's expression was enough to tell him that this opponent could not be motivated by simple covetousness, jealousy, or any other vulgar emotion. Please, forget I said that. It was immature of me. You did well to stop yourself. You have my compliments. If you had finished that sentence, I would have struck off your head and ended this without even bothering to test you." Then, the Golden Hero addressed Richard not as king, not as warrior, nor as heroic spirit, but as judge. "Circumstances have changed. Mongrel, I acknowledge you not as riffraff, but as a seeker worthy of my trial. If you survive, you will be my friend's ally and my certain enemy. Should that time come, I will permit you to leave your blood on my treasures again. This time as a person. Consider yourself honored. Click, clack, clatter. Clusters of little sounds wandered through the man's darkness. Whispering voices mixed with the sounds of hard objects colliding faintly vibrated John's eardrums. The metallic sounds, which refused even to stop while the voices spoke, sounded rough, but to John they seemed to have musical elegance. Where am I? He slowly raised himself. Strangely, he felt no pain, but all his other sensations were hazy. Only smell tickled his mind, an appetizing scent that included the aromas of fruit liqueur and toasting butter. Then John realized that he was in a restaurant. Warm orange light filled the air, but it was not electric light. It was a glow of candle flames. John could see a single man sitting at the enormous table illuminated by that glow, surrounded by stunningly beautiful women who chatted amiably and occasionally refilled the man's glass. When John tried to speak to the people around the table, the man elegantly wiped his mouth with a napkin, then leisurely turned to face him. Hey there, I see you're up. What, Mr. Caster? It was Alexandre Dumas, the caster who had made a contract with the chief of police, and who was well known to John and to the other members of Clan Calatin. Only his hair stuck up more, and he seemed a little larger than when John had met him in the workshop. What? His hair stuck up more? What am I doing here? Where's everyone else? At that point, John realized that Dumas was not looking at him. Huh? John tried to touch a candlestick, but his hand passed right through it. And that was not all. A beautiful woman carrying food walked right through him like a ghost. At that, John realized that he did not exist in this place. His brief training as a mage must have borne fruit, because he recognized this was no ordinary dream, but something of mystical significance. Relax. It's a restaurant. It's kind of high class, though, so try not to make a scene. Friend or foe, I suggest you listen to what I've got to say for now. At first, it seemed like Dumas was speaking to John, but his words were actually directed at someone standing behind and a little to the side of them. John was still confused, but he steeled himself and slowly turned to look behind him. And there stood a single wounded man. Part of his body was wrapped in bandages, stained there and here and there by oozing blood. But both the white of the bandages and the dark red of the freshly dried blood were quickly wiped from his impression of the man. Black. Okay, please, I'm going to scroll down, and is he going to be a black guy? Oh, thank God. Okay. Wait! Oh my God, it's him! Okay, so this is Dumas. This is Dumas, and yeah, he looks a bit different, right? This is Dumas, I guess, in life. Oh my God, he's talking. This is him talking to frickin'... Okay, I guess he appears in this. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. 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 The blackness of the man's coat seemed to express the color of his soul. His skin was pale to the point of being sickly, and his hair was far from dark. He must have been caught up in serious trouble, because while John caught glimpses of fine clothes such as noblemen might wear under his coat, the coat itself looked scorched all over. Still, John could not help feeling that the blackness of that coat was the man's true nature. While John hesitated, the man in the black coat continued to glare warily at Dumas without uttering a word. Dumas, perhaps sensing the man's bloodlust, shrugged and waved a hand. Oh, I take that back. I'm not a fan of getting killed, so let me make it clear, I'm not your enemy. If I were, you'd be on a ship to hell by now. Am I wrong? Actually, considering the enemies you pick up. Yeah, it's him talking, I'm just double checking. Actually, considering the enemies you took on, you'd be lucky if a trip to hell was the worst you got. Dumas picked up a nearby pitcher of water and poured it into a glass as he continued. Anyway, have a drink. You need someone to taste it for poison. I'll do the honors. At that, the pitch-black man addressed Dumas without relaxing his guard. Who are you? Do you know about me? Yeah, you could say that. I'm not directly involved, but I happened to find out about you, about what you've managed to get done, and about what you're trying to do now." At that, the dark man slowly rose to his feet, warier than ever. Demas held out the glass of water to him and nodded at the seat across the table as if testing him. "Have a seat. A count shouldn't be standing around like that." "Oh, or would you rather I call you something else then?" Then Demas uttered a proper name that was both the other man's outer surface and his innermost core. "Edmond Dantes. Nice name. It looked great in print, you know. Although, Le Comte de Monte Cristo would make a better title for a novel." Oh my god, he's here. This is crazy. Why are you white? Okay, Central Snowfield. "A trial, is it?" Richard asked the man standing on the roof as he readied his sword. "I see. I thought you were an archer, but are you perhaps of the ruler class?" That's funny, because now we do have ruler of him. Richard, drawing on the knowledge bestowed on him by the Grail, mentioned an extra class. The golden heroic spirit, however, laughed scornfully. "Fool! A ruler in a holy Grail war is merely an impartial scale that judges by the world's standard. There is nothing impartial about my judgments." This is funny because he later on does become a ruler. "The path I have walked and the wealth I have piled in my treasury are the scales that will judge you." Faced with a heroic spirit who ostentatiously declared that he was the rules, Richard grinned cheerfully and nodded. "A fool am I? I get that a lot." Richard sighed, resting his sword on his shoulder and glancing down at the road. "I only came here in the first place because I heard the guards who defend this city were going to investigate a heroic spirit spreading mysterious plague, and I thought I might be, let me try this again. I only came here in the first place because I heard that the guards who defend this city were going to investigate a heroic spirit spreading a mysterious plague, and thought I might actually be able to do something to help. I suppose that encounters in the Holy Grail War do naturally lead to fighting." "Do not disassemble, mongrel." The golden heroic spirit laughed scornfully. "What do you have to lament? You are enjoying this situation more than anyone." Richard flashed a fearless grin by way of an answer, and posed a question of his own to the golden heroic spirit. You know, your friend called that plague the Black Curse. Those guards have assembled to do something about it, am I right? Are you certain you don't want to help them? We could always form an alliance." Richard, who insisted on calling the police officers guards, recalled what his Lancer ally had told him, that if the curse and mud mix, it would be a disaster, while he waited for an answer. The golden heroic spirit, however, kept his arms folded and his eyes fixated on Richard. "That impertinent spell. I will blast it away when it shows itself. Nothing you do will alter that outcome. It is making itself a bit of a nuisance, but executing the source of the curse will put an end to that." "I see. It's true that I've only just arrived and don't fully grasp the situation, but it sounds like your trial will take care of everything I've got." Richard cracked his neck and inquired about his current predicaments. "It's not just my life on the scales, it's my whole past and future all taken together. Isn't that enough?" "Enough chatter. Are you a fool who needs everything spelled out for him?" Richard watched the golden heroic spirit make this unreasonable declaration with a wry grin. "I see. I accept that. So this is already a battlefield with survival on the line." Then, as he spoke his next words, the Lionheart sprang into action. "The pact is made. I'll take the words we exchanged for war cries, and launch my invasion." The instant he stepped forward, the distortions in the air around him began to shine. Then, as if all the stars that blanketed the night sky had fallen, innumerable noble phantasms rained down on Snowfield. Richard leapt from the roof of the building next door to the church as judgment closed in on him from all sides. It was both an infinite series of blows and never-ending single strike, death closing in from every direction with no end in sight. But Richard was not a beast that simply let himself be hunted. He was, after all, a heroic spirit who manifested in the Saber class, said to be the best of the seven. Faced with the trial of the unfathomable golden heroic spirit, Richard began to unleash his own power as a hero with the spirit origin of the king. The wave of noble phantasms poured down, some fast and some slow. Richard leapt on the roof as he wove his way between them. On-rushing noble phantasms. Richard kicked one of the weapons and twisted his body, dodging the flurry of blows that followed by a hair's breadth. His movements were too rough to be called acrobatics and too elegant to be called combat. He charged into the center of one of the oncoming blows. Any one of them would prove fatal if it struck him, as he had just declared, using his overwhelming speed to launch an invasion of that territory of death. Richard readied the sword in his hand while contorting his body and slashed upward into the air with all his might. The radiance that overflowed from the arc of his swing scythed through the onrushing blades and created a new path for him to launch his own attack. Even so, one wrong move would still cost him his life. He walked that fine line between life and death with superhuman speed and muttered not to anyone, but to encourage himself, "I may not have many qualities that can match yours." It was almost like a contract with himself, but when it comes to speed, I'm more than your match. Crystal Hill Casino Hotel, top floor. Tine Chalk, the master of Gilgamesh, the king of heroes, and also a girl who paid him heartfelt homage. She was a priestess who had been made over generations to avenge her people. The protectors of the land who had inherited power in a long, unbroken succession without belonging to the church. Pressure from both inside and outside the world of magecraft, brought to bear on them by countless mages and a clique of people in power, had forced them to their knees. In order to one day reclaim the land, they literally offered themselves to the land that had continued to protect them. They etched magic crests onto the bodies of their newborn children. Through those designs, etched using principles slightly different from those of Western magecraft, they forcibly linked their magic circuits to the land's ley lines and raised them as mystical catalysts. It was a wish. It was a miracle. It was a cry. It was a circuit. It was a sacrifice. It was a densely packed curse distilled from tens of thousands of lives. The actions of the mages who managed the land were synonymous with making a contract with the land, an extremely simple, pure curse called a contract. If they ventured beyond the reach of the land's ley lines, they would die. In exchange, by assimilating the land's ley lines even with their own lives, they are able to wield powerful magecraft with greatest efficiency, even without an incantation. They force the land to enlarge their magic circuits and pass them on to their children. Even Tine Chalk, who had been born as a sacrifice to the next generation, a mechanism to pass on her genes and a crest to a successor after undergoing that suffering. She had 12 older brothers and 9 older sisters, but they had all been taken into the land. After sacrifices to assimilate her human magic circuits with the land's ley lines, Tine's body had at last acquired an ability to wield magecraft that surpassed her father's. She had been fated to do the same thing to promising children of the next generation, whether they were sons or daughters, but the Holy Grail War had derailed that fate. The reason the mages had stolen the land from Tine's ancestors, the plunderers were on the verge of realizing their dearest wish. The protectors of the land had elevated Tine and begun to train her in combat magecraft and information about the Holy Grail War, all in order to make Tine Chalk a master in the Holy Grail War. It was a fact that they revered her as their chief. Some opposed it, but they were a minority within the tribe. At the same time, they understood that while she was a chief to be respected, the girl was also a sacrifice who would use up her life to achieve their goal, that she was a catalyst they must use up in order to carry out the reclamation of the land, the curse of the people. But she was not a miserable puppet led on by her people. She had faced this Holy Grail War prepared to expend her own life. Even if she was being controlled, it was not by the will of her people, but by her inherited destiny itself. Since she was very young, Tine Chalk had accepted that she would live as a curse against the usurper mages. But now Tine could do nothing but open her eyes wide and burn that scene into her memory. Numerous noble phantasms rained down like meteors. The weapons continued to slice through the unfeeling air, each and every one shrouded in mana, reminiscent of the Age of Gods. Tine was using a far-seeing spell to observe events on the ground from the top floor of the casino hotel Crystal Hill. Enhancing her eyesight with magecraft and looking down from the top floor directly would likely have sufficed, but her disposition as a person and her ability as a mage to sense danger as well as the instincts of her species awakened through the path that linked her to her heroic spirit as a master, all rejected the idea of looking down on the heroic spirit, Gilgamesh, the king of heroes, from on high. If she were a seasoned mage, she would have looked down at him without hesitation. She would have likely incurred the king of heroes' extreme displeasure by doing so, but that was another matter. She wondered if even watching him through a familiar might be disrespectful, but he had tolerated her observing his battle with Enkidu at a distance, so she judged that it fell short of a line she must not cross. Just as I would expect of Lord Gilgamesh. That other archer is certainly a formidable foe, but I'm sure Lord Gilgamesh is even more powerful. That poor Saber must already be. Then, Tina gasped. In the image she saw with her far-seeing spell, Saber was still alive. In fact, he was beginning to counter the King of Heroes' offensive. Who on earth is that heroic spirit? Saber, the class said to be the best in the Holy Grail War. According to Tina's subordinates' investigation, based on the relic that had been brought as a catalyst, it was conjured that the Mastermind's faction likely intended to summon King Arthur. She also received information from the Kuraoka mages, which had likewise thrown their lot in with Masterminds. Oh! That he had brought a relic related to Qin Shi Huangdi from mainland China. Oh wow, Qin Shi Huang is in this, okay. But she could not predict what class he would manifest as. Oh my god, is this a variant on Qin Shi Huang? There's no way. There's no way, right? There's no way Rider Qin Shi Huang is like the Pale Rider. There's no way. Huh. I mean, I guess he died. Does that count for why they summoned him like that? I don't know. Nevertheless, Tina had no intention of stealing either catalyst. Relics brought by the mages masterminding the Grail War would not be easy to take. Besides, the moment that Tina had learned that someone had set foot on land with the catalyst to Gilgamesh, she had made up her mind that the servant she should summon and the king she should serve was none other than King of Heroes, rumored to be the origin of all kings. Even after witnessing extraordinary servants such as that other archer, the man who called himself Alcides, and the horsewoman who called herself Queen of the Amazons, Tina had no doubt that the King of Heroes would win through to the end. That was how, exalted, proud, and filled with a royalty that would make everything and everyone bend to its magical will. Okay, some of these sentences are way too run-on. Like, I'm just, as an English teacher, this is way too run-on. That was how exalted, proud, and filled with a royalty that would make everything and everyone bend to its will, the magical energy she could sense through the path that was connected to them was. Like, that could have been done a lot better. I get what you're saying, but God, it's hard to read that. That Lancer, who was King of Heroes, called his friend. The Lancer, who the King of Heroes called his friend, was probably the only one who could challenge him. In which case, she had thought, all those who stood in the way before the final encounter was destined to be swept aside. She had dismissed information such as Saber being the best class as merely a rough approximation, and yet, so fast. Tina Chelk was forced to realize that, as the Saber class was hailed as the best, every Saber must have something extraordinary about them. She did not know whether this was King Arthur, as she had conjectured, or some other entirely different heroic spirit. Even by going what she could see of Saber through her far-seeing spell, his noble phantasm, or his spirit origin, did not seem to be a match for the King of Heroes or Alcides. It struck her as being on the same level as the Amazonian queen who had called herself Hippolyte, or perhaps a little higher. And yet, the Saber was still alive, in the midst of a fierce onslaught from Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon. He was not countering every blow like the Lancer Gilgamesh called his friend, nor was he taking every blow like Alcides, who was currently facing the police officers. Saber was continuing to evade the entire rain of weapons. He occasionally made the sword in his hand shine and struck away a few noble phantasms, but he kept those attacks to the bare minimum necessary. If he was only running away, Tina would have understood it, but the strangest thing about that Saber's actions was that they clearly seemed to be an offensive, not a retreat. It can't be. Sweat ran down Tina's brow as she watched Saber gradually closing in on Gilgamesh. He's still getting faster? The church, or the plaza behind the church. The boy hiding in the plaza... Oh my god, why am I not able to read today? The boy hiding in the shadow of the plaza's trees, Vladiscardos, watched the offense and defense being performed atop the church and the adjacent buildings and shouted, Wow! That ghoul guy's attacks are cheating, but the guy who's dodging them is almost as bad. It's like he's doing an action game dodge infinitely and canceling every move he makes. Oh my god, you're based. Oh my god, you're based. Your similes are always so crass. The telepathic grumbling came from Flat's servant, Jack the Ripper, who had reverted to the form of a watch. Jack, a berserker who had made a contract with Flat, had been robbed of a noble phantasm that it would be no exaggeration to call half of his spirit origin by Alcides and sustained extraordinary damage as a result. For that reason, he had transformed into an inanimate object in order to minimize magical energy consumption. But now, what action shall we take? But will you really be alright, Berserker? Even if I retreat, you'll find some excuse to go and help the police on your own, won't you? Our acquaintance has been short, but I've gotten a fairly good idea of how you act. Oh man, do I seem like that kind of hero? Flat sounded embarrassed. You probably aren't, the wristwatch heroic spirit replied telepathically, but concepts of good and evil aside, your professor tries to finish what he starts, doesn't he? As his student, I expect you'll follow his example. Oh, you've got me there, Jack. Can you read my mind? I would have to be awfully unperceptive to miss that. You're not foolish enough to charge in without a plan. There's a good chance your plan would be the height of foolishness. I'll have to guide you. Don't worry, I plan on going home alive. I've got to show you off to everybody after all. Couldn't you come up with a better reason? Jack enjoyed the absurd exchange, but it was like an injured person keeping up a conversation to keep their mind off the pain. Well, it doesn't matter. I know you're better suited to support than to rough and tumble work. I'll focus on supporting you while you support the others. I guess you're right. Flat deliberately did not ask Jack if he could still fight. It was so obvious to him that Jack was severely weakened. Being robbed of the concept called a noble phantasm had seriously destabilized his spirit origin. Instead, he asked a different question. If we beat that guy, will your spirit origin go back to how it was? Don't ask questions you already know the answers to. You can see it, can't you? Well, yes, from what I can see, the spirit origins have already completely fused. It's like they're melting together in some kind of super creepy mud-like stuff. Wonder what that is. Yes, even if we destroy that thing, that power probably won't return to me. Not unless I'm destroyed and resummoned from the throne. But, Flat answered dejectedly, that berserker would have his memories and everything reset. He wouldn't be the same person as you, would he? I don't mind if you call me Jack now. After revealing my noble phantasms and saying what I did, my true name must be an open secret now. My memories may be recorded in the throne, but as long as he's summoned as a piece in the Holy Grail War, another me won't share them. Although it might be different under particular, or should I say, abnormal conditions. Yes, I know. The professor still wants to see someone again in spite of that, but... Oh, yes. Your teacher is a veteran of the Holy Grail War, isn't he? The pair continued to converse as if nothing out of the ordinary, despite the golden heroic spirit's noble phantasms flying through the air within eyesight. Perhaps it was Flat's natural disposition, or perhaps he was being considered a Jack. Jack himself had realized that his spirit origin itself might be in jeopardy if he did not maintain his sanity by continuing the conversation. Still, we can't just sit here twiddling our thumbs. Or no, that's him. If we aren't going to retreat, then we have to do something to stop that heroic spirit turned demon. It'd be nice if he clashed with the gold guy and went off somewhere, but that golden archer is the enemy your teacher warned you to steer clear of. Now I understand why. He's a disaster to everybody equally. We'll have to act covertly. The pair considered how to make the rapid comeback and support the police unit. That said, they hardly had time to think it out properly. Not only did they not know when a stray projectile from the battle between Archer and Saber unfolding above them would fly in that direction, it also seemed that the police force would. Did not seem likely that the police force could hold out for long against the heroic spirit they were facing. What about using another command spell to boost you and secure the girl in the hospital? According to the information from the chief of the police, the girl's brain is affected by an unknown illness. I can't approve dragging her out there without the police support. The risk of other people becoming infected is supposed to be low, but if we drag out the girl without police support, her body might not hold up. Besides, we assumed we'd bring her to the church, but look at the state of that now. Flat looked at the church with the golden archer standing imposingly on the roof. Well, what about isolating her with a ward or something and making her invisible? I learned a lot of different patterns for concealment when I went to a tomb or something with the professor a little while back. In that case, the bowman who stole my power would probably blow away the whole hospital. That would probably be a piece of cake for that hero. Wait. What? Someone's here. Jack halted the conversation to give Flat a warning. Flat shifted his attention to his surroundings and found a figure that had drawn to the trees they were hiding under. The instant Flat, who had been initially ritually registered as a master, laid eyes on that figure, he knew that it was a being that, like Jack, had materialized as a heroic spirit. At the same time, he also realized it was not a heroic spirit suited for combat. Okay. Jack immediately took the form of an enormous wolf and barked menacingly at the newcomer. Stop right there, if you please. Who are you? Okay, who is this? I'm trying to figure this out. Okay, so Flat, who had been registered, lays eyes on the figure. He knew it was a being that, like Jack, was a heroic spirit, but was not one for combat. Okay, so who is this? Stop right there, if you please. Who are you? Is this Jack? I guess Jack is the wolf. Okay. Whoa, did you just turn into Le Chien Jack? Right? Flat shouted some kind of proper name, but Jack did not answer and kept his eyes on the man coming toward them. It's a man. The man had closely cropped hair, and his clothes, despite seeming antique, were finely tailored. He did not seem like a fighter. Oh, wait, is this Tomas? He did not seem like a fighter, but he did not give the impression of being a mage or horseman either. Based on your dress, I take it you come from the France of 1 to 200 years ago? Jack had taken the form of a wolf based on the rumors that Jack the Ripper was actually an animal. His question was also packed with animosity and menace particular to a beast. The man, who had stopped about 10 meters away, answered with a shrug. Hey, did anyone teach you not to judge a book by its cover? I'm not judging you by your looks, you know. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me your favorite food was Commercy Madeleines, or probably. Oh, Commercy Madeleines are delicious, aren't they? Flat quickly shot back without dropping his guard. Well, the man responded. Since you know what I'm talking about, I guess that means Commercy's still famous for its pastries? It is. A friend of mine from France always brings them as souvenirs for professors and friends. That's so. I'd love to try one and see how the taste has changed since I was alive. Whoops, I guess I just gave away that I'm from France just like I look. Oh well, it's no big deal compared to the taste of Madelines. The mystery man and Flat continued to discuss French communes with the air of a friendly chat. The meteor shower of noble phantasms continued to fall in the sky behind them. Jack, standing beside them in his huge wolf form, addressed Flat with a look of discomfort. Hey, this is no time for chit-chat. Who knows how many more minutes the police can last against that. However, I can't quite get the measure of you, boy, the man said with a sudden grin. His mood had changed. The way you let yourself get caught up in talking about sweets while you work up a spell behind my back is pure mage. But there's nothing magey about still going about sweets way after you finish that spell. At that, Jack looked at Flat in surprise, and Flat looked confused. Huh? Well, I got it ready because I thought you might be dangerous if you were an enemy. But since you're not an enemy, activating it would just be a waste of magical energy, and it wouldn't be fair to you either, would it? After observing him in silence, the man looked at Flat and continued cheerfully. Boy, what are you? Huh? Oh, you want me to introduce myself? I'm Flat. I don't want to become a target for curses, and it's needlessly long anyway, so I can't casually give away my full name, but the name I usually give people is Flat Escardos. I'm Berserker's Master. Well, that wasn't what I meant, but it doesn't matter. Also, I don't think you should casually tell people that you even have a full name either. Anyway, now you told me your name, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't tell you mine. Your name? Jack asked suspiciously. You, a servant, would tell your name to us, participants in the same Holy Grail War? I don't want to hear that from somebody who might as well have been shouting I'm Jack the Ripper with the noble phantasms he was showing off and the things he was saying back there. Although I hear you did your thing after I was dead and buried. My weak points won't change whether I give you my true name or not. Lop off my head, I'll die. Stab me through the heart, I'll die. If I drown, I'll die. If I starve, I'll die. If I freeze, I'll die. If I get old, I'll die. See? I've got loads of weaknesses. What kinds of weaknesses could stop a man who couldn't even stop a simple curse? Wait, what kind of weakness can a man who can't even stop a simple curse be hiding at this point? The heroic spirit showed no trace of hostility, but given the state of his spirit origin, Jack could not afford to take chances. He positioned himself to protect Flat and continued to eye the man warily. It doesn't make sense. If you aren't hostile, then why make contact with us? Hey, our masters have an alliance, right? I figure we servants should follow suit. I see. That's who you are. That makes sense, but the master that Flat and Jack had made an alliance with, the chief of the Snowfield Police Department, had told them, I can't reveal my servants' true name, but they specialize in logistical support. You'll never meet face to face. They might be temporary allies, but given that they would ultimately fight over the Grail, it would hardly be advantageous to reveal true names or allow servants to come into contact with each other unnecessarily. Jack saw the sense in that, and that was why he could not help feeling that the servant appearing in front of them was unnatural. And yet, that said, I've got reasons for telling you my name. I can't offer enough collateral to make a proper alliance in combat, but from what I see of your methods, kid, I figure that spilling my guts is the best way to team up with you for real. With a cheerful shrug, as if to say he was well aware of the distrustful eyes fixed on him, the heroic spirit introduced myself. The name's Damas. I'm a caster. I've got no idea why. Huh? This is funny, actually. Flat could not suppress an incredulous response. The heroic spirit who called himself Damas shrugged. Alexandra Damas. Never heard of me? What? This time, Flat let out what was clearly a quiet cry of surprise and shouted, Which one? What do you mean, which one? The super strong general who worked for Napoleon? Or his son who wrote The Three Musketeers and Le Mille et une Fantôme? Or maybe his son who wrote The Lady of the Camellias? I'm the second one. Les Trois Mousquetaires aside, you know some pretty obscure titles. Still, I'm happy to see people know my boy's stuff better than mine. Caster Damas said with a self-deprecating chuckle. Of course I know it. I've seen The Three Musketeers as a movie, a cartoon, and even a puppet show. Wow, are you really the real deal? My heroic spirit's like a copy, so I don't know about the real deal, but if you're asking if I'm Dumas, then the answer is oui. Still, I figured my books would stick around for over a century. I never figured my books would stick around for over a century. Guess it shows that for better or worse, human nature hasn't changed that much. You want to look up to someone, though, better make him my boy. He's got real talent. Oh, please don't talk like your talent's fake. There's an alumnus from my school who comes from a whole family of book lovers, and they got a bunch of original copies printed back in your day. Oh, wow, this is good as an army, Jack. Oh, I really wish I could keep talking and information out of him, but helping the police comes first, so let's ask him for help. It's true. We're out of time. If you say so, Master, then I'll trust him for now, but... With that, Jack resumed his watch form and fastened himself to Flat's wrist. Damas watched that and chuckled. I appreciate your confidence, but, you know, there's no way I can handle that thing on my own, right? And since you're going out of your way to stay as a watch so you don't have to move, I figure your spirit origin must be in pretty rough shape. Damas' gaze was focused on the flashes of light that came intermittently from Main Street on the other side of the church. The other heroic spirits seemed to have moved from the church roof while they weren't looking, so there was no telling who was causing the flashes or thunderous roars that followed them. If you still want to do something, though, I can lend a hand. You really mean it? Kid, you don't act like a mage, but are you ready to toss your life into the pot to get what you want? Huh? Don't worry, it ain't a witch's cauldron that only comes out right when it feels like. It's a cutting-edge pressure cooker. I'll even throw in a kitchen timer. Damas flashed a fearless grin at Flat and Jack as he rattled off odd turns of phrase. And most importantly, it's me who'll be doing the cooking. Frick, this is crazy. Oh man, okay. Well. So it seems like Damas will fix and enhance Jack? Oh my god, is he gonna just put him to become like the Count of Monte Cristo or something? Oh my god. Well, like that's it for today then. Next time, we're moving on to the interlude, Mercenary Assassin Vampire 1, right? We're going to see kind of from what it kind of looks, this is a battle issue, right? We're going to be just going between two different groups of battles and seeing what happens. So this is pretty exciting. So thank you all for listening, and we'll be back next time with the next section of Fate Strange Fake. So we'll see you then. Ciao.
Yo.